story begins in Aleppo, Syria, where an elite US Navy SEAL team, led by Senior Chief John Kelly, is deployed on a covert extraction mission. Their objective is to rescue a captured CIA operative being held hostage by armed militants. John's team includes Karen Greer, CIA Deputy Director James Greer's niece, and teammates Rowdy King and Dallas. Though presented as a simple rescue, the mission turns out to be far more complicated. As the team breaches the compound, they engage in intense close-quarters combat, efficiently eliminating several hostiles. However, when they inspect the bodies, John realizes the men they killed aren't local militants, but heavily armed Russians, which immediately raises red flags. The CIA liaison on the mission, Robert Ritter, remains vague and detached about the details, which bothers John. Nevertheless, the team completes their mission, extracts the operative, and returns to base. Upon returning home to the United States, the team is debriefed. John expresses his discomfort with the mission, questioning Ritter about why they were never told about the Russians. But Ritter deflects the question, suggesting that such intel is above John's clearance level. This evasive attitude creates visible tension, as John senses that something about the operation doesn't add up. Despite his instincts telling him otherwise, John decides to focus on his personal life for the time being. He returns to his wife, Pam, who is pregnant with their first child, and they begin preparing for the baby's arrival. Their peaceful domestic life serves as a temporary escape from the chaos of his missions. However, John continues to feel uneasy, knowing that the Syria operation might have deeper implications. Meanwhile, elsewhere across the country, the rest of John's SEAL team tries to resume normalcy as well. Rowdy spends time at home, Dallas visits family, and Karen Greer continues working within the Navy command structure. Yet, unbeknownst to them, a shadowy network has already set a plan in motion. One day, assassins begin targeting the SEALs, one by one, in a series of coordinated attacks. Rowdy is run over by a bus while taking out the trash at home and left for dead. However, Dallas, on his way home from an outing, gets gunned down by some armed men in his car. Meanwhile, back at John's home, he and Pam are having a quiet night in their bedroom, when John suddenly gets all bricked up and tries to clap his heavily pregnant wife. Pam, however, tells him she's not in the mood, so he heads to the basement downstairs to goon with some loud music. During his stroking session, a group of armed men arrives and takes out the power, but John is too indulged in his activity to notice. After a short while, his laptop's battery goes off, and when he tries to charge it, he then realizes that the power is out. Taking off his headsets, John hears the sound of people breaking in, so he immediately grabs a Glock and a flashlight and heads upstairs. Meanwhile, the intruders get to John's room and, assuming he's the one in bed, shoot at Pam, unaliving both her and the baby. In some sick, twisted fashion, one of the men then submits to the other and makes him unalive him. While John climbs his way up, he notices some of the armed men stationed at the staircase, so he takes them down, alerting the man in his room. John then gets to the room entrance and shoots at the last man, but he gets shot as well. Due to his bulletproof vest, the man survives the shot, although badly injured, so he tries to shoot at John, who's equally still breathing, but he notices that he has run out of bullets, so he escapes. Terribly injured, John uses his last strength to drag himself to the bedside, where he discovers the terror that has just happened, before passing out. Eventually, reports of the attacks quickly reach Navy Command, and it becomes clear that someone is deliberately eliminating everyone involved in the Syria mission. Finding out about the whole situation, Karen gets scared to death, so she confronts Ritter about it, but he doesn't give her any definitive answer. Days later, John wakes up in a military hospital, bandaged and in visible pain. Karen visits him and breaks the devastating news. His wife and unborn daughter weren't lucky enough to survive. She also tells him about the other SEAL agents who were also murdered in similar home invasions. As a result, she has been put under strict surveillance so she doesn't end up in the afterlife as well. Bitter, John tries to find out if she knows who was responsible for the assault, but Karen reveals that she has no leads. Although she believes it might be Russian retaliation for what happened in Aleppo, she doesn't have proof. Over a couple of months, while John recovers in the hospital and tries to get back in shape, Karen gets promoted and eventually becomes his superior. She visits him one day and hands him classified information on the attackers who were found dead in his house. The attackers were indeed associated with the Russians they took down in Aleppo. John, heartbroken and furious, demands to know who the surviving suspect is, but Karen tells him he's a ghost, and no one knows who he is. However, she tells him about a man identified as Andrei Vasilyev, who was the one who issued passports to the 4 men. Realizing that the man would be able to help them identify the 4th suspect, John suggests that they interrogate him, but Karen tells him they already tried, and that the man is completely out of reach, as he's under diplomatic protection and will be leaving the country soon. John returns home that night and goes through a massive crash out. However, he refuses to stand by, while the man responsible for his family's death walks free. Determined to take matters into his own hands, John begins planning his own operation. Using his training and resourcefulness, he tracks Vasilyev's movements. One evening, while Vasilyev is being escorted to an airport under Russian diplomatic immunity,
Hey, I'm dropping off somebody at Dulles Airport.
John intercepts him by crashing his car. He then pours gasoline over the car and sets it on fire before the guards can react. Getting into the burning car, John unalives the guards and threatens Vasilyev to reveal the last suspect's name, but Vasilyev refuses to speak. John then tortures him slowly to death.
Give me a name and I'll make it quick.
And he eventually gives up the name before dying. When law enforcement arrives, John surrenders without resistance. John is arrested for murder and taken into custody under heavy guard. During his interrogation, he remains silent and uncooperative, refusing to give any details or show remorse for what he's done.
And you're telling me that's coincidental?
CIA officials, including Ritter, argue that he has gone rogue and put national security at risk, claiming his actions were reckless and personal. However, Karen defends him, saying his behavior is driven by grief and the government's failure to protect him and his family. When Karen later visits him privately, John reveals that he had planned everything from the start. He explains that his arrest wasn't a mistake, but a deliberate move to get inside the system and find out who was really behind the attacks. Karen warns him that the people he's dealing with won't stop until he's silenced, but John simply tells her that he's ready for whatever comes next. Later, as he's escorted into his cell, John notices suspicious faces among the guards and prisoners watching him too closely. Before long, a senior officer informs him that several guards will be entering his cell for what's described as a security inspection. John immediately senses that it's a setup. Realizing the danger, he removes his shirt, pours water over himself to make it harder for anyone to grab him, and stands waiting. Moments later, the cell door opens and several guards rush in. John moves first, using his training to take them down one by one with military precision. Within seconds, all of them are on the ground, groaning in pain. By the time reinforcements arrive, John has one guard in a chokehold. He tightens his grip and threatens to end him if anyone comes closer, forcing the rest to back down and do as he says. Even behind bars, John makes it clear that he's not someone who can be controlled or silenced. After a while, a U.S. Marshal approaches, introducing himself as Kelvin Townsend. Townsend slides him a phone, telling him someone would like to speak with him. When John answers the phone, He finds out that the caller is Karen, who asks him to follow the marshal if he wants to be safe. The marshal takes John to a safe house where he meets Ritter and a bunch of high-ranking CIA agents. While they question him about what he's trying to do, he reveals the identity of the fourth man involved in his wife's mother. The officials are surprised by the name, as Viktor Rykov, as he mentioned, was a skilled military agent they had sanctioned a long time ago. When they present his picture, and John confirms it, the officials then realize that they're in for a ride, so they immediately prepare a team to go after him. John offers to be on the team, and the officials are against it, but realizing that he's the only one with nearly enough skill to take down Viktor, they sign him up. But they give him the condition of returning as a felon to the penitentiary after the mission. A covert team gets assembled to travel to Murmansk, Russia, to locate and apprehend Viktor, who's believed to be the mastermind behind the assassinations of John's teammates and family. Ritter is assigned to the team as the CIA representative, though John remains deeply distrustful of him. The team departs aboard a military transport plane, heading toward Russian territory. However, while en route, they are intercepted by a Russian fighter jet that recognizes them as a threat and opens fire, causing severe damage to the plane. While the plane glides towards destruction, the pilot manages to keep it stable long enough for the team to prepare for impact. As the plane crashes into the Barents Sea, John and the others struggle to escape the wreckage, to not to drown. Moreover, they face the additional challenge of freezing waters, as they do not have an escape route. Thinking fast, John dives back into the drowning plane and uses all his strength to find an inflatable raft, which was stored somewhere in the plane. Thanks to his bravery, the team uses the raft to get themselves to land. They then deflate it afterward, so as not to raise any suspicions. After the team arrives somewhere safe and decides to get familiar with each other, in case they get booted to the great beyond during the mission, John voices his suspicions. He believes that Ritter, who had apparently taken a different flight to Russia, must be in on something, as things always go bad when he's involved. Together, they confront him for a super friendly chat, but Ritter shares that he's just as clueless. Proceeding with the mission, the team moves through the outskirts of Murmansk under the cover of darkness, eventually finding the building where Rykov is said to be hiding. Breaching the building, John goes ahead of his teammates and finally comes face to face with Rykov. However, instead of resisting, Rykov greets him calmly and reveals that he has been expecting them. He tells John that the entire operation is not what it seems, and that both of them are pawns in a much larger game orchestrated by forces within the US government. John, confused but suspicious, demands clarity. But before Rykov can explain further, he detonates a hidden explosive strapped to his chest, unaliving himself in the process. The explosion rocks the building, but John and the rest of the team quickly take cover, so they survive. In the aftermath of the blast, the team regroups and starts piecing together what Viktor said before he died. If his claim about being a CIA agent is true, it means Thomas Clay, the head of the CIA, has been manipulating everything from the start. His goal is to create conflict between the United States and Russia, reigniting Cold War tensions to unite Americans against a common enemy. The realization hits hard, especially when they understand how many lives have already been lost because of Clay's scheme.
Because it looks like we did it.
Ritter, though guilty of keeping secrets, is genuinely shocked by the revelation. Meanwhile, Karen quickly takes charge, insisting that they must extract the remaining team members before Russian forces arrive. However, their escape route is soon compromised, as snipers begin firing from nearby buildings. The team returns fire, but struggles to advance under heavy attack. One of the soldiers gets hit, slowing them down, and despite the danger, John refuses to leave the body behind, knowing it could spark an international crisis if found. Together, They drag their fallen teammate through the debris while trying to survive the constant gunfire. Before long, Russian reinforcements close in on all sides, surrounding the building. With no other way out, John volunteers to stay behind and cover their retreat. He gathers ammunition, sets up traps, and prepares for the inevitable assault. Meanwhile, Karen and Ritter reluctantly retreat with the body, using John's distraction to push toward the extraction point. As the Russians advance, John fights with everything he has. He uses grenades, tripwires, and close combat to take down waves of enemy soldiers. Even after sustaining multiple injuries, he refuses to stop. Each time he runs out of ammunition, he switches weapons and continues fighting. When the last of his traps is triggered and the enemy closes in, he decides to end it on his own terms. John detonates the explosives he planted earlier, causing a massive explosion that wipes out the remaining Russian forces. Though heavily wounded, John survives the blast and manages to find an ambulance nearby. Using his last bit of strength, he drives back toward the base, refusing to quit until he sees his team again. When he finally arrives, Karen and Ritter are there waiting for him. Exhausted but alive, John reunites with them, having succeeded in keeping his team safe and stopping a conspiracy that could have started a new war. The team then quickly takes him to a departing ship, which they use to cross the border back to the United States. Not wanting John to return as a prisoner, Ritter comes up with an interesting plan. He hands him a large amount of cash and asks him to go with the narrative that he never made it out of the mission alive. Hearing this, John realizes that he was wrong about Ritter the whole time. Back in Washington, weeks later, while the CIA quietly settles into the aftermath of the mission, John suddenly confronts Thomas Clay in a restroom one evening. Clay is stunned to see him alive, since the agency had officially listed John as dead. However, John explains that faking his death was the only way he could expose the truth behind the entire operation. He lays out everything he discovered: the staged conflict, the manipulated intelligence, and the deliberate attempt to spark tension between the United States and Russia. However, he notices how Clay doesn't seem surprised by his revelation, realizing that his suspicions are true. Clay was behind it all. Without hesitation, John grabs him, drags him out, and forces him into a car. As they speed through the city, John demands to know why Clay orchestrated such chaos. Clay tries to deflect, but John presses harder, threatening to harm his family if he doesn't talk. Under pressure, Clay completely folds and confesses that he engineered the entire plot, claiming it was all for the good of the country, a necessary evil to unite the American people. Enraged by the justification, John abruptly changes direction and drives the car straight off a bridge, plunging into the water below. Clay panics and pleads for his life, but John ignores his cries. As the vehicle sinks, John forces him to say the name of his late wife, making him confront the human cost of his manipulation. Moments later, the car is submerged completely, and both men disappear beneath the waves. Months later, a proper funeral is held for John, and several officials show up. After the ceremony, when Karen returns to her car, John welcomes her. It is then revealed that Karen had rescued him from the drowning car, and had also retrieved a listening device they had planted to expose Clay's actions to the higher-ups. While John remains a ghost, Ritter gets promoted to CIA director. Months later, John, now going by the name John Clark, meets up with Ritter one night and shares his ideas about forming a multinational counterterrorism unit. A team composed of operatives from different nations who will work together to prevent conflicts before they escalate. Ritter is intrigued by the idea, noting that such a unit could operate above traditional politics. He shows his validation and welcomes John back to the team. The end. Thank you for sticking to the end of my video. Please do me the biggest favor by leaving a like, comment, and subscribe, and I hope to see you in the next video.